Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this week's Pastor's Podcast. I am Cory, here with Joel
Hello, hello.
and Jason.
Howdy, y'all.
So we are going to do a podcast today. We haven't done one in a couple months, but had several things that we wanted to just spend a little bit more time unpacking as pastors to make sure we had greater communication and clarity on for members. So three things we want to cover real quick over the next few minutes. The first one is our church calendar, which we talked about a little bit last week. Pastor Joel had a kind of introduction video in last week's members memo. And then we want to talk a little bit about communion and digital services to provide some additional communication about that to make sure we are all understanding what's happening. And then lastly, I want to end by just talking about Advent and Christmas Eve, some of the things that we are excited about and just some exhortations. So those are the three things we want to cover over the next few minutes. So Joel, I'm going to start with you. Pose a question to you because you did the video last week about the church calendar, and these are things that we've kind of touched on a little bit here and there throughout the history and the life of our church, but trying to be a little bit more intentional about it now. And so when we talk about the church calendar, give us just a kind of overview of what do we mean by church calendar.
Yeah, for sure. So the idea of having annual rhythms isn't something that's new. It's not even new to the church necessarily. It's, if you read throughout the scriptures, the people of Israel, as they established themselves as a corporate entity, as a people, as a large gathering of people, they not only developed kind of daily, weekly rhythms, but also had these kind of annual rhythms. It's important in the New Testament that there is hardly anything about annual rhythms. In fact, the only mention of annual rhythms is kind of a warning to not kind of have those be a crutch, and that those things in the Hebrew scriptures were a shadow of the substance of Christ, so not to replace the substance of Christ with these kind of routines. But nonetheless, early kind of church fathers and pastors had this idea to kind of live out their faith in rhythms. So even the weekly gathering is not as clearly articulated in the New Testament as you might think it is. Like, there isn't a verse that says, "Thou shalt gather on the Lord's day every day or every week." But rather, we have these practices that have developed throughout church history that we kind of have adopted as this continuation of God's people, the people that have put their faith in Jesus. I think in modern times, particularly within American Protestant Christianity, there was a really kind of strong moving away from things like the church calendar. That kind of maybe felt like it was too traditional, too stuffy, or whatever it might be. But nonetheless, there actually has been a large movement back, that a lot of people in younger generations perhaps are looking for more structure from the church to help them in their faith, to live out their faith. So the church calendar is really simply this: it is marking time throughout the period of a year, marking time with the story of God. So we talked about in the video last week. Wow. We talked in the video last week about how in our services we've tried to be very explicit in how our services aren't just a bunch of things that we do. The liturgy isn't full of just these actions like singing and hearing a sermon and praying and stuff, but that everything that we do, it tells a story. And so in our services, we tell the story of the gospel, the experience of the gospel. What is it like when somebody experiences the truth about Jesus? They first understand God is holy, God is different from us. They understand that they're a sinner. They understand that Jesus saves them, and then they understand that Jesus sends them. And that kind of outlines the biblical story of redemption in creation, fall, redemption, and consummation. The annual rhythms of what has historically been practiced as the church calendar is aiming still at a story, but very focused on the story of Christ. So it begins in Advent with Christ coming into the world, draping himself in humanity, becoming a man. That's the beginning of the story in the annual rhythms that have been practiced throughout history. And then it goes all the way through his resurrection and ascension and sending of the church in Pentecost. So each season that we walk through is kind of just moving through this narrative that we see in the Gospels in the New Testament. It's moving through that narrative and kind of just highlighting the life of Jesus, the life, death, birth, life, death, and resurrection and sending of the church. So with that, I guess I could just say most people have annual rhythms, whether they realize it or not. A lot of people, myself included, my family that I grew up, my immediate unit, we celebrated Christmas and Easter. Like, that wasn't a weird thing. And probably for most people that are listening to this, you probably did the same thing if you grew up in any kind of household that claimed Christ, or even not. In my case, like we kind of just did Christmas and Easter and didn't really do church beyond that. So the idea of annual rhythms aren't something that's necessarily new, but we're just trying to be a bit more intentional with them as a community, and not just as a community, but to really see this happen on an individual level, to see people kind of embrace this movement from season to season, and celebrate with their own traditions. We provided a lot of resources for you guys, not saying like, okay, as a church, we are all going through this single resource, but rather we're trying to give you guys different resources for you to be able to build your own traditions, your own habits on these annual basis. So sorry if that was long.
No, that's good. Thank you, Joel. I think it's good because I like City Church is unique in that we have, I know some of our members come from high churches, in the sense of very liturgical churches. Maybe they grew up Catholic, or and then we have members that came from kind of very non-liturgical churches, whether it be non-denominational, charismatic, or even particular Baptist churches, things like that, depending upon that. So for some people, this may not be new information at all, maybe stuff that you grew up with a lot, but for others, particularly for people who are new to the Christian faith or grew up in kind of non-liturgical churches, this is a lot of like new information and stuff. So I think one thing just saying, like, if that's where you are, like, don't, a lot of this can be new, but it's good things. Like, no way is it de-emphasizing the role of faith and the importance of the work of the Spirit in our lives. I think sometimes, and I came from a non-liturgical background, so I think I resonate with some of the concerns there by people, and so I think sometimes you can think that this means like a removing of the Spirit or becoming too formal, and like none of those things are happening. It's just simply recognizing that, like, in the Bible, we see elements of rituals and repeated activities as a means of providing transformation and formation. And we also see that just in sociology in general, that all cultures have some type of rites of passage, ritual events that are meaning to communicate the passing of time, the introduction to new seasons of life, intensification into certain seasons of life. So even as simple as like a graduation ceremony is a ritual. It's a rite of passage kind of transformation. So just trying to encourage those things a little bit more, as Joel said, to provide a little bit more structure. And one of the things that I think is at least for me exciting, that I like rhythm and routine. I don't like change too much, so it helps. I like. Hang on, buddy.
I'm gonna be in the front yard.
Okay, talking to my son here. So sorry. Okay, buddy. This is, again, podcast in time of a pandemic. So so that it provides some structure to the life of our church throughout the year, just how doing like way we're preaching through things. So I'm excited about that. One of the things that we are shifting to correspond with the church calendar is our Global Partners offering. So if you've been around City Church for a while, you know that we normally take that up in December. And it's been such a great time and encouraging time for people to give. We've taken up as much as $60,000 in the past for our global partners, and it is what funds our support of the work in Washington, D.C. and in Scotland and West Africa. So we are going to shift that to after Easter each year, or at least that's the tentative plan, to shift that from taking up in December to Pentecost, which corresponds 50 days after Passover and Easter. So it would be May in this year. It would rotate each year, obviously depending on when Easter is. So it's a time to really kind of flesh that out more with the church calendar and the Spirit coming in Pentecost and the apostles and the early church being sent out to be witnesses for Christ. That definitely corresponds to what we're trying to do with our partnerships, whether they be local church planning or in DC or international. So even things like that, trying to see the life of our church correspond to these things a little bit more. So I'm excited. New things, not really new, but fleshing out definitely more than we have done in the past. So I'm personally excited about it.
Yeah, good stuff, guys. And I think for me personally, I'm just excited about the ability to have some reminders of what God is doing in the form of a story that we're kind of telling throughout the calendar. We are all prone to forget. I think God's people have always been prone to forget. I'm definitely more prone to forget the older I get, but to forget what Jesus has done. And this is just built-in rhythms that will hopefully kind of, like Joel said, mark the year, provide seasons of reminder, just to be always focusing on what Christ has done and is doing in us. So good stuff. So shifting gears a little bit, why don't we move now to talking about communion and our digital services. So I guess if you have been with us for a while, you know that since March, we have been doing things differently from time to time. So we started off not gathering, not doing any kind of online service. And then we moved to doing a type of digital service that we encouraged all of you to participate in. And we were doing that in the beginning. We did not encourage communion. Then we felt comfortable asking people to gather together in homes. And if you were doing that, we said that you could participate in communion together. And we started including that in the service. And now with this COVID resurgence, we're kind of back to not encouraging home gatherings. But now we are saying we could participate digitally, so to speak, with communion. So I guess if there was any kind of criticism of that, you could say maybe we've been wishy-washy, don't really know exactly how we're thinking about that. But Cory, would you mind just kind of reiterating why it is that we have chosen to do that and how we're thinking about it, just to kind of clarify things for our people?
Yeah, we'd love to, Jason. So yeah, you listen to that description and you think, oh, it seems a little bit all over the place, and maybe different things are being communicated. As a keen observation. Yeah. So as we stated back in March or April, look, there's no playbook for doing all the things we're trying to do in a pandemic. No one alive has done these things before. And so everybody is trying to just figure out what it means to be faithful in so many different areas, faithful as a church, faithful to ministering to your congregation, your community. And so, yeah, so there's a progression of kind of understanding and adaptation. Maybe a progression of adaptation is the best word. So as Jason said, that was our original kind of whether we were thinking through that. And the reason for that is because of our understanding of what communion is. That communion is at a minimum, it's a symbolic representation of a lot of things. Not only does it point to the life and death of Jesus and his resurrection, but it also points to who we are as a church, that it represents, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10, because there's one loaf, we're also one body. So it also represents our unity as a body. And that's why it's tied to the gathering of the church, that when we gather and we break off, we're not breaking off just because of the broken body of Christ, but we're also breaking off of one loaf because we are one body in Christ. So it's not only that communicating the vertical relationship, but also the horizontal relationship. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't doing anything to compromise that and maintain the integrity of actually what we believe communion is. And so you have that, and at the same time, look, we are approaching 10 months, 9 months, 10 months that we haven't met together. That has a toll on a congregation. It has a toll on people, and so it's trying to balance the integrity of what we understand communion to represent, and also what it means to maintain a sense of unity as a church in this type of season. And so just a lot of conflicting things that we're trying to navigate. And so one of the reasons we were excited about going to home gatherings and encouraging households that did provide an opportunity to receive communion in a way that was still reflecting brothers and sisters gathering together to some degree. So we were excited about that. And now in this season, as we just don't feel comfortable promoting that because of the increase in cases, government recommendations, all these kind of things, and we don't know when that's going to end. That could end in a month. It could last longer. We just don't know. We're not prophets in that sense. So there's reason to be optimistic because of a vaccine and all those kind of things. But in the removing of the home gatherings, just to be honest, like we were trying to be pastorally sensitive about what it would mean to then take communion away again. And we talked about it as elders for quite a while. We tried to work through this the best way that we could, and try to think through all angles. And in the end, we felt that it was important for the well-being of our congregation, for the spiritual well-being of our congregation, to continue to receive the Lord's table in a way that doesn't compromise its integrity. So one of the reasons why we instituted the elements, actually seeing the elements in the last couple of weeks, was saying, okay, look, there's going to be men and women that are not gathering in other households. Some of our brothers and sisters are by themselves in their home alone. And so can we receive the table in a way that allows for it to be received, but also still maintains that we are one body, gathering together in so much as we can possibly do in a season like this. So whether it's myself or Jason or another pastor or whoever that's having the elements, one of the reasons we have them there now visually, and that person is saying, this is the Lord's table, this is communion, this is the body and blood of Jesus broken and shed for you, is so that although we are not physically together, that we are viewing this at the same time, we're participating together, we are receiving it together at the same time, so that it allows it to communicate again the idea that we are one body, and that communion is communicating that we're one body. So again, yeah, that's not. It is a little bit different, an adaptation of where we were 3 months ago and 6 months ago. But again, part of it is with each situation, just trying to constantly adapt and look, these are not things that we would encourage in ordinary times. These are not ordinary times. And so in unordinary times, you often have to do extraordinary things. Not that this is extraordinary in how we often use the word, but it's extraordinary. It's different than being ordinary, that we're doing this for this season because of just the situation that we're in. So hopefully that provides some clarity. I think one just practical note, that just to kind of, as the service moves on, and Joel's done such a great job, and Matt, of providing graphics and things of helping us move throughout the service, that when communion's coming toward the end, like before 10 o'clock comes, like have your communion elements ready there, so that you don't have to like, oh, right, go get them, but just that they're there. And so when that time comes at the end of the sermon, and then we transition to that, that you don't have to go to the fridge and find juice, or the pantry find crackers or whatever, matzo bread, that you have that ready for you. Just kind of a practical encouragement. So I don't know if you guys have anything to add, anything I didn't make clear. If you remember, you're listening, you have questions, like, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask them. So
Yeah, well said. I don't have anything to add to that. So thank you, Cory. So moving on to the next topic. So back to kind of the church calendar. So we have already entered into the season of Advent, and we are trying to be very intentional with what we are offering and how we're talking about it. And so I'm going to throw this to Joel. So Joel, how would you encourage our people? It's one thing for the church to be doing things and you say, oh, that's nice. How would you encourage our people to participate in what we are doing for Advent, as well as Christmas Eve, which is part of that season? And how would you encourage our people to do that, and even to think missionally and outside of our own just kind of family units and our church members, but to consider our neighbors and our community during the season?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, that question, especially the last part that you just asked about how to love and serve our neighbors in this season, is really difficult to answer. And if you have creative ideas, you should share them with your friends. For people like me that often feel stuck in this season of not being able to just be with someone, I value that so much. But yeah, so this whole next year we've branded as Sent with a Story. That Sent with a Story concept is the whole of the Christian year, starting in Advent and then going through Pentecost. And part of the reason why we really wanted, again, to emphasize that annual feel was because we're going into a season where a lot of us, I think, certainly for me, and I know many other people, a lot of us are kind of faced with a daunting reality that winter is here. There's less sunlight. It's a lot darker for much more of the day. And we're confined to our homes in a way that we have never been. It's unprecedented in our lifetime, certainly. So hopefully this idea of, even beyond the immediate of our lives and the things that we do and spend our time doing, that we are a part of a story that's bigger and goes beyond our day-to-day and the stipulations that we have on us right now. And that one of the things I said in the video is that we have everything that we need to be faithful in this season. We just have to think creatively. Part of the reason why I love the language of story is because it's dynamic, it moves. And the Christian life is far more of a dynamic life than it is a static life. There are certainly truths that are the truth, and it doesn't change. And God is who He is, and He remains the same yesterday, today, and forever. But the life that He has given us is dynamic. And if we ever needed a time to think dynamically about our Christian faith, the time is now. So yeah, we've provided these resources for Advent. The series that we're in for Advent, we're calling We Need a Light. You saw the graphic. I think Matt did a beautiful job with that. It's a gorgeous graphic. As we're in this season, we're asking people to take a look at the list of resources, or if you have a resource already that you use every year, or you're trying something new this year, you go right ahead. And build these rhythms, whether you are a single person or you're living with roommates, or you have a family, or what have you. Start to build some of these rhythms. And specifically to Jason's question about how might you be able to include your neighbors in this, I don't think it's too weird of a thing to ask a friend that's a neighbor that maybe doesn't know Jesus, to ask them, even through Zoom, to participate in some of the things that maybe you're setting up. One of the things that for the last 9 years since Alice and I have been married, we've done Advent, like a lighting every Sunday night in the 4 Sundays of Advent that is represented with a different word. It's a tradition that stems pretty far back in church history. We've done that since we've been married, and every year have invited our friends and neighbors into that. This year obviously is a little bit different. So I think honestly, the more that I've interacted with my neighbors, the people that don't yet know Jesus, I think everybody is hurting. And just to get a phone call or a text that says, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. It's going to be weird virtually, but do you want to join me with it?" It's like, I actually think that'll go a longer way than we might think. So yeah, just I'll stop there. Yeah, you guys have any other thoughts on that? Anything that you guys would add?
Yeah, it is a little strange in the time that we're in, particularly like with not even maybe wanting to bring people into our home or whatever. But just recently, I had a conversation with a gentleman who's not a Christian that I've been getting to know. And, I just think there's big questions that people are asking because of the kind of times that we find ourselves in, different pain points, suffering all around us. Even if you're not personally suffering, you see it in an intense way all around you. And I think people are just in this kind of like a mood to ask those bigger questions. And I think it's just beautiful how we're bringing that kind of idea of the story, the bigger story that we all find ourselves in, and getting people to think outside of themselves and to focus on something bigger. I think people are just really willing and open to those conversations. Not everyone, but I think a lot more people are than would be normal. And then in this season, there's this kind of just like Americanized like thing with Christmas. I don't know how else to put it, but people are kind of open to more spiritual things, to be giving. And so I think, just even just, inviting people to view or to participate in the online service. That's something that I did with this gentleman. I was like, I don't know what he would have done about coming into a church service, but I can send him a link and he can watch it. And so I think that's something really important. And so yeah, that's just one way I've been thinking about it. Cory, I don't know if you have anything before we talk about Christmas Eve and what it means to invite people into that as well.
No, just one note on the service is, I think one thing about the Gospel of John, I mean, maybe more so than any of the other Gospels, it is specifically written as an evangelistic tract. I mean, one of the things we'll see it this week with John, and we see it at the end of the book, throughout the book. All this is so that you may believe that Jesus is the Son of God. So it's a great, it is a great gospel to invite people to that are not Christians to participate in and to be a part of, because it is, again, the whole thing is trying to make the case that regardless of what, like, Jesus is the Son of God and what that means. So anyway, just to reiterate what you said about the services, it's a great time to invite people to services because of just the Gospel of John and what it lends itself to.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of, I know, as we've talked in our staff meetings and in elder meetings, even a more focused like desire to want to address those who don't know Jesus. So I think I would be comfortable in saying, if you do send this to friends or neighbors who don't have a Christian background, that they will be addressed, things will be explained in a way that they would be able to understand. That's a big focus of ours right now. So Joel, why don't you talk about Christmas Eve and the potential there to invite our neighbors into that?
Yeah, definitely. So we're excited about this. We're trying something new. Like everything else in 2020, it's brand new ideas. Typically on Christmas Eve, we gather in the theater and kind of have a condensed version of a service. Obviously, that's not something that we're able to do this year. And so we have actually gone out to some of our other friends here that are churches in the area, and asked if we could all gather together on Christmas Eve in the Peace Park just to sing some carols. And that's going to be kind of a new thing for us. It's like I said, we typically have done that in the theater, not able to do that, and so we're trying to come up with a creative way, even if it's, hopefully what I have in my mind is this kind of stunning light snowfall you know, Christmas, you know, Jason's got these magic candles that are real candles that everybody is holding somehow and not going out by the snow. Like, that's what I have in my mind. I'm sure it's going to be something a lot like, not as cool. But that's what we're doing. And so that's something that actually we think that our neighbors might be interested in coming alongside us. That's, you know, we need something to get us out of our house this winter, and rain or shine, snow or no snow, the plan is to be there on December 24th. So there should be information in your memo already, but we are hoping to within the next week or so put something out on social media that'll be highly shareable and quick, and something that you can share with your friends and kind of repost on your pages to your circles. But we'd love to see people as spaced out as possible singing Christmas carols on December 24th this year at the Peace Park.
I'm personally very excited about this. So I don't, yeah, this what could be. So obviously it would be great if it's like 30 degrees and some light snow and stuff. Hopefully not 30, sleeting and raining. But yeah, so I'm excited about this. And it's an easy thing to invite people to, I think, I hope. So I have anything to add other than I'm excited about it. Looking forward to it. So, Jason, you good to go? Yeah. All right, Jason.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. And Joel said I had magic candles. I don't have these magic candles yet. This was a debate whether we should have real candles, fake candles. I was trying to come up with a middle ground of candles that wouldn't blow out in a gust of Cleveland winter wind. So anyway, we'll figure that out. We'll have some kind of light source, hopefully, that we can share. But no, I'm excited just to encourage you to, again, think about neighbors, think about friends and family or whatever that don't know Jesus. And this is just one more, I think, we hope, easy kind of invite that people would be willing to participate in. And yeah, let's do this together. So Cory, you can wrap it up. That's all I got.
Before the sun covers Jason up on his, he's slowly moving to the right there. So anyway, thanks for listening. Hopefully, as we've covered these things, they've been helpful. As always, like if you have questions, like reach out to us, let us know those. And our prayers at this Advent season is a time where we can remember our need for Christ, the significance of his coming, the longing of God's people as they waited for his first coming, and our longing for his second coming. So as always, thanks for listening, and we hope you have a great weekend.